Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Shadow Snowwolf, and we are back with the second video here on the channel. I'm super excited for what I'm going to get into in this video because this is going to build the foundation for everything that you're going to do in this channel. In this video, I'm going to be explaining what dopamine is, how to use it as a leverage towards self-development, and pretty much how your new knowledge of neuroscience is going to influence and skyrocket your trajectory when it comes to your self-improvement journey. So bear in mind with me, I did actually purchase a whiteboard that I was gonna be using in future videos for visual elements, just to trigger more of those senses and to give you a better understanding of what we're looking at. But my fucking board, like I was putting it together and I just could not figure it out. So we're gonna be substituting with a smaller whiteboard. So bear with me for this video. In the future videos, I should have this taken care of, so don't at me on this. I got the board in my hand right here. I'm just gonna turn around and show it to you because I don't have the stand-up board, which would have been handy right about now, but hey, we gotta improvise. So I'm gonna explain what dopamine is to start with. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's released in the brain that's responsible for pleasure, reward, and activity or repetition. It influences motivation, drive, and action towards an object or activity, and is released before the activity and after the activity. So I'm gonna give you guys a visual demonstration on dopamine, since you want to combine both auditory and visual elements. So we got dopamine, and this is, we got motivation, drive, action, repetition. So these are our keywords, is where do this equals good, do it again. And the more that you repeat this process right here, the stronger the effect. So it also follows this formula of x equals action, y equals frequency of action, z equals results, quantity of dopamine released. I'm lacking space a little bit, but it's okay. So we have x times y times z is equal to results. So on here, we have the action multiplied by the frequency of the action gives you quantity of dopamine released. So the more you partake in that action and the more frequently you partake in that action, the more automatic it becomes, which is the dopamine loop. You guys have probably noticed this, where you woke up and then first thing in the morning you went on your phone and you started scrolling, and then the more times you kept on tapping on the app and scrolling, the harder and harder it became to control yourself and stop scrolling. That's because it follows this formula of action times repetition is equal to result. So if you apply this principle to productive things like working out, for example, or practicing a martial art, the more frequently you partake in that action, on top of just doing that action, the more dopamine it release. And dopamine is the scale of how much dopamine is released is dependent on a multitude of factors, like the perceived value, the perceived reward. It can differ from person to person, because for me, practicing martial arts would release more dopamine than me doing ballet, because I don't really care about ballet. But for someone that does ballet, practicing ballet frequently will lead to you participating in that activity more often, which will lead to better results, which we're going to learn how to leverage. Another visual example of what dopamine is like via an analogy. So you guys are probably familiar with, if you've ever played an RPG, like a turn-based fantasy game, an MP meter. So you got MP. I don't know if you guys have played Final Fantasy or something like that, but this is your meter, like MP. But if we translate this to dopamine terms, this is your meter. And when you wake up every day, this refreshes. So you'll start out with a full bar. And then everything has a cost. So doom scrolling, for example, is very dopaminergic. So for the activities that release a lot of dopamine, that's going to cost more of this number. So say scrolling costs like 20 MP, which this is a pretty huge number in comparison to this number, but just for example, it costs 20 MP. So now that one tap now has you at 80. You do it again, now you're at 60. You do it again, now you're at 40. Do it again, 20, until you're out of usable dopamine. And when this happens, when you have a very low quantity of dopamine left, you're cooked because you are now in control by the algorithm. This is when you experience uncontrollable negative behaviors like scrolling, and you just cannot stop. An ideal day would look like this. So you start out with 300, wake up. This doesn't really cost dopamine, but this is where we'll start. Brush teeth, like your morning routine, brush teeth, do chores, do homework, work, go to the gym. Let's see, drive. These are relatively low costs. And like I said, the cost will differ based on the perceived value of the thing, whether it's conscious or subconscious, as well as, let's see, this is fucking boring, but yeah, so we have these things. If we total up this costs, that is 15, 25, 45, 70. Did I do that right? I think so, yeah. 90. So you have 300 minus 90. You have a grand total of 210 dopamine points, figuratively speaking, left. Which means you are way less likely to get controlled, because if you do the activities that are less dopaminergic, you are less likely to get controlled. Because once this bar runs out, you're at 0, you're cooked, like we agreed. You are now controlled by the behavior. Whether that's smoking, we're talking about negative behaviors in this example. Smoking, doom scrolling, whatever. This thing now owns you. Your brain is now a rat on a wheel, and you cannot stop doing these things in that moment until your bar refreshes tomorrow. So how can you stop this from happening and be more constructive with your dopamine use? So first, understand that you have an MP bar, like we said, that more realistically we'll put at like 300 to start. So this is where the economy part of the video comes from, because you want to be strategic with your dopamine use, because if you waste it, then your brain takes control over you, and you want to control your brain before it controls you. So realize that certain activities have a higher cost, and with this, say scrolling costs like, we'll say MP costs. Scrolling costs 50 MP. Washing dishes costs 10 MP. So things that are conventionally more boring, like washing dishes, I put that right. Doing your homework, let's see what else we have here. Cleaning. These cost very low dopamine, which is why you often get bored when you do them. But you can actually, if you can find a way to make these things fun, then it can release more dopamine. Because, for example, when it comes to my homework, I'll have different RPG like systems in place to where I get a reward for doing my homework, which now is gonna cost more dopamine in the sense of like it'll reverse because it's a positive thing. But if we're talking about negative things, when you run out of this MP bar, that's when your brain controls you. Your dopamine is not free, and you have to pay a cost. And you can either pay for a bad thing, which will not give you results, or you can pay for a good thing. So really it depends how you want to use those points, like we mentioned before. Great way of understanding how you use these dopamine points and how your dopamine is being regulated is by keeping track of the activities you do on a day-to-day basis. So for example, if you have very unproductive days where you're wasting away hours on things that are not important, write it down. Give yourself a figurative MP bar. And then write down the things that you did. So, I mean, I'll write down what I did. Record this video. Went to work. Ate. And then assign at a cost. The cost part is not mandatory. This is just to understand. And then the remainder, if you have a higher number and you have more dopamine to work with, and if you have more dopamine to work with, that means you get to use it the way that you like rather than the way that your brain wants to use against you. And this is just what the board looks like. Now you can more or less understand how addiction works, because imagine that you have like a poison effect on your MP bar, where if you're participating in an activity that has an addiction, you're bleeding away that dopamine level slowly and slowly until you just cannot use your MP anymore. And if you can't use your MP anymore, that means you're not in control.